So, political analyst, blogger, attorney, Royal Alexander here, but on September 11th, 19 years ago, holy cow, you were in Washington, D.C., or at least in Virginia, and you've told the story before, and we wanted to have you back. You were like, what are you, 400 yards? Well, it's your story. Hell, go ahead.
Absolutely. I was in Crystal City, Virginia, which is the equivalent of a few hundred yards where we were, the hotel. I was with the late former Congressman Clyde Holloway, and he had gone on into D.C. We were there for some fundraising for a race for Congress we were in, and when the plane hit the Pentagon, I was probably 400 yards, maybe, as the crow flies, between 400 and 500 yards.
You're in your hotel room? You're outside at that point?
I was in the hotel room, and I heard...
Was your building was your room facing the Pentagon? You're on the... It was.
But I wasn't looking there. It was a big roar sound that got my attention. And I looked over, and I saw smoke billowing. I quickly walked outside, and I saw smoke billowing from the corner of the Pentagon. So much kind of happened at once.
What motivated you at that point to go outside?
This roar sound that just didn't fit with the normal roar of traffic in the morning.
No, the point I mean is I might have gotten under the bed at that point. I'm intrigued. But you had said before, pardon me, and I want you to pick it back up, that you said that was sort of everyone's reaction.
It was. I walked outside, and I knew immediately, of course, there's the Pentagon, there's billowing black smoke coming out of it. And as the minutes began to tick by, no one knew, keep in mind, at that point, America had never been struck by any sort of terrorism.
I had made the point earlier on at my house on that morning. I was off that week. And when the first plane hit the tower, all I could think of was the 1945 when a plane crashed into the Empire State Building. And my dad, when I was a kid, would always tell that story. You know, back in the Empire State Building. And all I was thinking about was that story and my dad.
It was to stand there and to begin to think, okay, something really strange happened. Other people were out in the parking lot looking around. Then in the next... in these kind of things, you kind of lose track of time. But so I'm going to say a short period later, I began to see the Pentagon probably has 30,000 employees.
What?
Yeah. And hundreds and hundreds and hundreds.
So I don't really have if you see, everybody knows what it's shaped like, a Pentagon, but you don't have it unless you're there. You don't realize how big it is.
It's huge. It's huge. And you begin to see people pour. The I-395 the highway goes at this level, and there's like a tunnel away to go from the Pentagon parking lot into Crystal City. And people begin to pour into Crystal City in a way that just doesn't happen at that period of the morning every day. I mean, you see tons of traffic going into D.C. You don't see a massive amount of people, black smoke coming through the tunnel, the escape part from the parking lot into Crystal City. And that little area just got packed with people, and
on foot,
like an exodus. I mean, I always.
So you notice people. Well, obviously there's a plane, so there's hundreds, hell, thousands of people evacuating from the Pentagon building.
Exactly. And again, I didn't know it was a plane. I just knew there was a huge roar sound. Some sort of explosion had happened, and
I would imagine everybody thought at that point, like we just talked about. A plane crashed, and that's horrible, but the gravity of a terror attack was not top of mind.
Nothing. And then you could hear radios playing. People were saying there's been some sort of incident at the Pentagon. But to see those people packing in, and I say it was an exodus of biblical proportion, is how in the past it has.
30,000 people is a lot.
And again, as time went on, it just began to the Crystal City area I was in. It's a stretch of hotels, some shopping areas, but it filled up quickly. It seemed to me all the coffee shops were empty. People were on the street walking. It was just very strange, all of it. And it was probably 2 hours at least before people began to say, oh no, it was a plane and it was by design. And so then what was strange is how I lived in D.C. at different times for 8 years. And I'd never seen a day where the roar of traffic was not. I mean, D.C. is a city that really never sleeps also. I know they say that about New York City. D.C. doesn't really ever sleep either. For there to be nothing but helicopters circulating, military helicopters circulating, high in the sky, there were fighter planes slowly going around D.C. There were these black Suburbans just also striking looking up. And the windows were down, and these guys were holding all kind of weaponry. And I don't know enough about weaponry other than it looks very serious.
Other than big is big.
Big is big, and it's scary looking is scary looking.
Yeah, yeah.
That's all that was going on.
How far into this did you start to realize, or did people start to realize from other media, from having their phones, and et cetera, that something else has happened in New York and Pennsylvania, and B, though the tragedy of a plane crash at the Pentagon would be great, that this was something even greater?
I know it's hard to believe, but probably 2 hours before it all got put together.
Really?
Because D.C. wasn't listening to New York.
Your tragedy is your tragedy.
Right. It's that, again, keep in mind, those were innocent days in America. We've never had something like that happen before.
Well, I had said before, it's hijackers were going to Cuba, and that was about the extent of it.
It was. That's exactly right. But within about 2 hours, the people were going to say, okay, we have these two things in New York City, then something about the Pennsylvania field, and now the Pentagon. And then it wasn't the way America thinks. You're saying we got attacked by terrorists? Probably 2 hours. And then when I realized, you know what, I think this was later in the day, that plane was probably headed toward the Capitol. I have a brother, an older brother, went to Jesuit also. Tom, my oldest brother, worked for U.S. Senator John Kyle and was in the Capitol building at the time. And had that plane hit the Capitol, the one I think hit the Pentagon, I think it was designed, I think they were going for the biggest landmarks, American landmarks they could, to strike the biggest blow psychologically. And I think they wanted to hit the Capitol, but they missed. And the Pentagon was kind of an afterthought. I'll always believe that they intended to hit the Capitol.